Now, a month after Italy's inconclusive general elections, the country's president is beginning official consultations with party leaders with a view of forming a new government. The March 4th vote witnessed a spectacular rise of anti-establishment and Eurosceptic forces, but no single party or coalition commanded a majority in Parliament. So there are fears that this will lead to political instability in the Eurozone's third largest economy. For more on this, I'm joined by Ben Dudman, who has been following the election and its aftermath for our internet desk. Ben, it's been a month since those elections. Have we any clearer idea of what the next Italian government might look like?
Well, I'm afraid, Eve, I can't give you Italy's next government, and it's looking very unlikely that we'll have it by the end of this first round of talks tomorrow. It could take days, it could take weeks. Now, we have to bear in mind that this election brought about a seismic shift in the Italian political landscape. Whatever comes next is bound to be very different from what we've known so far. There's been some intense chatter. It's largely revolved around two figures, the nominal winners of the vote. One is Luigi Di Maio. Now, he's the leader of the anti-establishment Five Star movement. And that's easily now the biggest party in Parliament. The other is Matteo Salvini. He's in charge of the Eurosceptic and pretty hard-right League Party, which has emerged as a dominant force in the largest coalition of parties on the right of the political spectrum. Both of them say it's their job to form the next government, but neither has a majority of seats. So really, at the moment, it looks like the only way they can govern is if they agree to do so together.
Indeed, they're both running roughly 33–37% of that overall vote. But how likely are we to see those kind of two, the coalition of right-wing parties and the Five Star movement, actually coming together?
Well, they're two very different parties, reflecting the growing divide we have between the richer north of Italy and the poorer south. Now, the League is based in the north. That's where they're strongest. They lean heavily to the right. They want sweeping tax cuts. They want less red tape. Five Star, on the other hand, is strongest in the south. They have several clearly left-wing policies, including a flagship policy of a basic income for the poorest households. So very different policies. Now, having said that, they are the two parties with momentum right now. And they've been dictating the tempo of the informal talks so far, and we've seen some chemistry developing between the two. At one point, Salvini joked that he had Di Maio on the phone more often than his own dear mamma, which is a big statement, of course.
For an Italian in particular.
Absolutely, big for Italy. There's momentum. They are the two symbolic winners. So it's expected that they form some kind of understanding. Now, as you said, this is sort of a Eurosceptic landscape. Salvini is a close friend of Marine Le Pen, the far-right leader in France. So this is all very alarming for EU leaders. Both of them have said they've promised a more confrontational stance with Europe. They've said they'll ignore EU budget rules, and at least Salvini has borrowed Donald Trump's Italy first mantra. Having said that, Italy is not the United States, and Italian politicians generally talk a better game than they play.
And indeed, often we see in these election campaigns, we hear one thing and we see a very different action following it. But of course, Italy then battling with that migration question in that EU construct. But very quickly, Ben, before we leave it, these are relatively new parties, I mean, that have, as you say, gained a new momentum. What's happened to the mainstream?
Well, they took a beating in this election. We've seen it happen in other EU countries. It was even more so the case in Italy. Take the incumbent party, the centre-left Democratic Party, formerly led by Matteo Renzi. He's on his way out. They've lost 2/3 of their seats in Parliament. On paper, they still have just about enough MPs to support a five-star government, which would be more coherent ideologically. But Renzi has made it very clear, no alliance with the populists, as he calls them. Another one who said he would stop the populists is Berlusconi. Now, what he didn't expect is that he would be doing so from a position of unprecedented weakness, having lost control of that centre-right coalition. Luigi Di Maio has made it very clear to Salvini he wants nothing to do with Berlusconi. So Salvini is going to have to get rid of his ally Berlusconi in that coalition if he wants to govern with the Five Star movement. But he's reluctant to do that because he needs a united right behind him to have a strong hand in negotiations. So it's all very complicated in a very divided country.